But the unique aspect of the digital realm and of cybersecurity is that we're all affected by it all the time, in every way. So you're at the front of the fight every day. The reason that this doesn't affect you every day is because there's just so many people and so many devices, and there's so much out there. There is some security through obscurity, as they say, but we're all impacted.
What could be the most prominent cybersecurity risk that your company faces today, and how can we mitigate that problem? We're speaking about this issue with our next guest, Justin Leger. He is the CEO of Cybeats, an organization that focuses on solving this problem. Welcome to the show, Justin. Good to host you today.
Thank you, David. Really appreciate you having me.
Before we talk about the product that you offer and the solution that you offer, let's talk about the problem itself. Cybersecurity is a very broad subject. In particular, the problems that your company focuses on fixing. What are they? How severe could they be to an organization?
Yeah. Cybersecurity, as you say, is an incredibly broad subject, but really at the end of the day, we're looking to protect our digital infrastructure, our digital our data, the things that we hold precious. Software is so important to modern life. It's tied into everything that we do. Try to pick a device that doesn't run on some kind of software today, and you can imagine the scope of how serious the security of that is. Um, we're often finding ways that nefarious actors, whether they be criminals or state actors fighting against each other, exploit vulnerabilities in our cyber infrastructure. And we're so rarely finding new ways of combating against it. We seem to always be one step behind. What our focus is on the actual building blocks of software. So we're focused on the software supply chain. Something that many people don't realize is much of the software that we use is built on open source components. 95%. So feel very comfortable with throwing that number out there of software out there. It uses some element of open source components, and within those components are a bunch of lines of code that people don't really get into. They don't actually look into the detail of what is on each line of code, whether there's something malicious in there or some vulnerability. Now, obviously, people gravitate to the trustworthy sources when they're building software, but still, vulnerabilities emerge, and often companies are found asking the question, "What's in my software?" When a new vulnerability comes up, especially the more serious and prolific ones, they're asking that question with a lot more intensity. And to date, there hasn't been that good of a way to address that. And we're trying to push a new standard and take advantage of some regulatory tailwinds to actually be able to answer the question of what's in my software.
So when you say companies that may face this issue, which industries are we referring to?
Uh, well, looking at an analyst group like Gartner, they believe that everybody's affected. Any company that either makes or consumes software is going to have an interest in the ingredients list. You wouldn't go to the store and buy food that you didn't really know what was in it or had some way of tracing the supply chain of where that food came from. We get food recalls all the time. And it's important to be able to trace back where all of that stuff came from. The same is not true today for software. We don't have that transparency, so we're not able to go back and find out very quickly how we can address new vulnerabilities or malicious code that's in our software. So companies that are most interested in this today are companies like medical device manufacturers, industrial control systems, anybody that's tied into critical infrastructure and actually has a clear and present threat against them, and also that has a very high degree of consequence if any issues were exploited. But to answer your question simply, I think everybody's going to have an interest in this within the next coming years. But today, we're mainly seeing traction with medical device manufacturers and critical infrastructure.
Okay, so given these industries that you just mentioned, can you give us some concrete examples of a vulnerability in a specific software and what happens in real life if these vulnerabilities are not addressed?
Yeah, certainly. not that long ago, a couple of years ago, there was a vulnerability in a component called Log4j. And the reason Log4j, you can Google that, is so important is that it's very prolific. It's in a lot of software. And companies were left asking themselves, okay, where's Log4j in my stack? How affected are we by this? How exposed are we by this? What is the risk to our company? What is the risk to our customers based on this? So Log4j is it manages data within software. So nefarious actors were able to get in basically through a back door and exploit that vulnerability to execute their own code and steal important data and do any number of other nefarious activities. Keep using that word, but the point is that they didn't have transparency into where this was. Critical infrastructure companies, you can imagine, they're trying to keep the power grid running, and people are looking to disrupt these things. So basically, in the first few hours of this, rather, first few days of this vulnerability being discovered and announced, there was no fix for it. So really, they're trying to just mitigate risk, mitigate damage at this point, but they couldn't point to where Log4j was. So we have examples of companies spending millions of dollars and upwards of 3 months just trying to identify where it was. When along come a solution like ours, and now you can answer that in minutes rather than in months.
Okay, so can you just elaborate a bit more? So Log4j, what exactly is it? How does it work?
Yeah, it's one of these building blocks of software. It's an ingredient. It just happened to be tainted at the time, right? And that vulnerability was discovered and exploited, and there was really no way to fix it. People couldn't even tell what software they had this component in necessarily in a quick and concise way to help address it.
Okay, so when you reference malicious intent, who would have this malicious intent, and what would they do with this vulnerability?
Yeah, cybercrime is a $1 trillion industry with a T. It's massive. It's growing. We have the Army, Navy, and the Air Force to defend us in land, sea, and air, and we have entities out there that are trying to protect us in the digital realm as well. But the unique aspect of the digital realm and of cybersecurity is that we're all affected by it all the time, in every way. So you're at the front of the fight every day. The reason that this doesn't affect you every day is because there's just so many people and so many devices, and there's so much out there. There is some security through obscurity, as they say, but we're all impacted. So there's no end of people that are looking to exploit vulnerabilities in software to their ends, whether that's monetary. There's obviously lots of state activity to disrupt critical infrastructure, disrupting pipelines, affecting power grids, you name it. So we have to build a bit more security into our software. And what we're seeing culturally is a shift away from the perimeter approach, and more a shift towards making things more secure by design. And that's certainly something that we identify with. And our particular approach is to give a bit more transparency, which you can view that as a double-edged sword. But if you build a fence, you need to know where the holes are in the fence. And beyond just knowing where the holes are, if you've got 1,000 holes in your fence, you need something to tell you, okay, where are the big ones? Where are the ones that I need to address right now? Where are the ones I need to address today? And that's something that we help to do. So we're taking more of an intelligence approach to helping provide security. We want to be able to point folks in the right direction on what they need to address right now to get the most big effect in terms of securing their software.
Do you know how vulnerable banks are to hacking?
I mean, they're as vulnerable as everybody else. I would be very surprised to hear that in their software development cycle, they're not using some open source components. And I would be equally surprised to hear that they know what is on every line of code. So I think there's a certain level of due diligence that companies should be taking. Certainly, the government agrees with that approach in the United States in particular, that there needs to be more transparency into what companies are putting into their software. Um, we've seen an executive order back in May 2022, I believe, from President Biden that stated that basically any company that does business with the United States federal government will need to submit SBOMs for any software elements that are included with their products or offerings. We've seen the FDA again in the spring announced that as of October 2023, so just this past month, medical device manufacturers are going to need to submit SBOMs, software bills of material, that these ingredients lists of software that will when they submit a new device for approval, that they need to give that. So there's a pull for that transparency on the government side. I think industry will follow, regardless of the regulatory pressure, just because it's good practice, just because it helps address risk. And we have seen interest from some banks and financial institutions looking to improve their security apparatus without that government push, but it's just a matter of time. We've seen additional interest and focus on telecom, and really anything critical that runs on software is going to at some point have to adopt SBOMs into their practice, which provides us an opportunity to work with them and help them through that process.
Okay, so tell us more about SBOM. So, software bill of materials, what exactly is it? It's an extensive list of ingredients, you said. What does that mean in practical terms?
Yeah, SBOMs are simply a standard, and it's created jointly by industry and government, and in particular championed by the National Institute of Standards and Technology to address the lack of transparency in the software supply chain. A standard that allows us to answer the question, what's in our software? It's like a list of ingredients, the components, the libraries, the licenses, and dependencies in the software. It's a record. So when matched with the right platform, you can actually go back and reduce the time it takes to address vulnerabilities that are discovered within those components. So what we've seen in the last 12 months is an accelerated adoption of this standard, largely driven by that executive order 14028 that I had mentioned. And latest surveys forecast that 88% of organizations are going to have some use of SBOM by the end of 2023, which shows massive growth. I think just around 5% were using the standard in 2021, and so many of these companies, governments, agencies, vendors, and the like, are just really starting to figure out what all of this means. What do you do with an SBOM? How do you actually get the most value out of it? And so enters Cybeats.
Justin, tell us a bit about yourself and your personal background and your professional background. What led you to your current endeavors at Cybeats? You've just been announced as CEO. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Before that, you were a chief operating officer, and you've worked at a number of other companies before that. Tell us about your journey up to now.
Certainly. I'm a pretty values-driven guy. I started from a young age in the armed forces. Just as a kid, really went through university with them. Spent a whole career in the military. Really served in special operations forces. I did the business, and it was very fulfilling. But at some point, had to transition out of that life. And so I've moved into a few different roles that kind of supported my core mission of protection. I'm a protector, like to maintain what should be maintained, and protect the good things. So, worked in delivery of health services in the province of British Columbia. Worked on a federal contract to support Elections Canada more recently, and then moved into working with Cybeats. And really, I view a common thread across all of these things, which is that values-based protector type of role. Um, and the cybersecurity one is honestly most interesting to me because of just how important it is. And there are so many different ways to attack this problem. And we're just one. But I think we're going an important one is and an emerging approach to doing that. So um, yeah, it's incredibly interesting, very dynamic industry, and there's a lot of opportunity for growth, which I find very satisfying.
Well, we thank you for your service in Canada, so I appreciate that. Now, just back for the last segment of our conversation, backing up for a minute, do you think that the nature of warfare in the future will be more cyber in nature and less kinetic?
Absolutely. Um, Really, what we're seeing play out in more recent conflicts, like obviously, the person who can go in and hold the ground wins, of course. But the ability for effect, right? You're always looking to create the most significant effect with the fewest resources, right? War isn't just about hands and feet skills. It's a war of logistics. It's a war of capabilities. And cyber, I would put as the most important one today, as a supporting feature to actually going in on the ground. But when a $40 drone can take out a $4 million tank, you've got to start to assess your approach, right? We saw the same thing in World War One, uh, World War II rather, with battleships going completely out the door. They weren't as valuable anymore. You could just so easily deal with those with new effects like submarines, so an aircraft carrier. So war's evolving all the time, and cyber is at the front of that. Where I think cyber is really interesting and unique, as I mentioned, everybody's involved all of the time, um, but it's also evolving so fast, and it's really, really hard to keep up. So it's really is a battle of innovation in some ways, and certainly your attack surface is bigger than any other attack surface that humankind has ever known. So
Well, can you give
uh,
us some examples on a nation state level where our vulnerabilities exist? So, for example, let's say Canada, where we both are located currently, if an adversary were to attack Canada using a cyber method, what would that look like, and how could the nation defend against such an attack?
that's a big question, and we're going to be postulating here a bit, but it really depends on the effect that you want to have. Do you want to get access to sensitive data and use that for any number of purposes? Do you want to know intimate details of the enemy's capabilities? Do you want to know uh, maybe some compromising information about individuals? Do you want to disrupt the financial system? Do you want to disrupt uh, critical infrastructure? Like I said, the attack surface is absolutely massive, and the tools that they have at their disposal to do that are just as varied. So really, it is a question of the willpower and of both entities, of both attacking and defending to deal with that. Um, but the stakes couldn't be higher. I mean, Warren Buffett has stated on multiple occasions that cyber threats are the greatest threats known to mankind, greater than nuclear weapons, just because of how prolific the digital realm is in our daily lives.
And how has AI changed the landscape of cyber threats?
Well, this one, if I could tell you with any definitive answer, we'd probably be richer guys, but that still remains to be seen exactly how that's going to affect. But imagine technology that it doesn't rest, it doesn't sleep, and it can think like a person. It's not there yet, but it's certainly heading that way. And the level of creativity that an artificial intelligence can bring, that to me is what's really compelling. The unknown unknowns that it can uncover through machine learning algorithms that are looking for patterns that we can't perceive. That's really going to be very explosive. But we also can use that technology to defend as well. So it is a double-edged sword, and uh, who can say where it's going to end up? Smarter guys than me are certainly working on that problem.
You're very humble, Justin. Finally, I know this is not the topic of our conversation per se, we're focused, but maybe give us some advice for how we can personally defend against cyber attacks or hacks, either for our bank accounts or emails, or I'll give you a personal anecdote. Early in the year, my Twitter was hacked. I had to report it. It took basically a while before Twitter recovered my account. So that was, stuff like that. How do we prevent that from happening?
Yeah, prevention, as you say, that's the name of the game. You can put in protections, on your personal accounts. There's multi-factor authentication available. You should always use that. You should always use complex passwords. You should always make your passwords inaccessible to others. There are solutions out there. There's a level of risk that you take putting all of your passwords in a password manager, of course, but there's emerging technology like pass keys that folks are using that allows you to go to a passwordless approach using biometric authentication. Um, Really, if you haven't been hacked yet, it's because you're lucky, and it'll happen eventually. Someone's going to get something, whether it's an email account, an old email account you didn't know about, and then once they're in there, how can they leverage that to get access to other accounts? What personal information do you have stored with companies? You've trusted a lot of personal information with companies and trusting that they're not going to get hacked. And so once I know your intimate details, what damage can I do? Um, Really, it's a matter of prevention. So just having good digital hygiene, not spreading your information all over the place, using some of those fundamental things that I think at this point most people are aware of: multi-factor authentication, complex passwords, not using, random devices you find on the street, and, not because that happens every day. But we've heard recently about people putting malware into airport USB charging ports, and so when folks plug their devices in, that gives an
Really?
avenue for,
Okay. Because I
yeah.
do that on
Don't use
every
those.
flight.
I know, right? So just be careful of that. That's a new one one that I've recently read about. So plugging your devices into known devices, and unsecure Wi-Fi is another big one that folks can exploit. So really, just prevention is the name of the game.
I had a couple of times in when I was traveling. People come up to me. I don't think they had malicious intent, but their phones were like running out of battery. They're looking for chargers. They said, "Can I plug my phone into your laptop?" I said, "No. What are you talking about?"
Yeah, that's risky.
But yeah, I understand. But thank you for your tips, and thank you for educating us. Where can we learn more about your work in Cybeats?
Yeah, Cybeats.com, Cybeats, Cybeats.com. That's our website. And yeah, would love for folks to learn more about what we're doing, and how we're taking a preventative approach to cybersecurity.
All right. Well, I appreciate your work. Thank you again for coming on the show. We'll speak again next time.
Thank you, sir. Take care.
And thank you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe and follow Justin's work in the link down below.